And also, as a woman, there's different times of the month. Sometimes the PMS just gets so much and it's like, can you stop pressing the keys on your keyboard like that?
Hello guys, and welcome back to a brand new podcast. We are currently in our podcast studio. You guys might know by now, but it's our caravan on our land here in Portugal.
That we did actually film a renovation of. Sorry if you feel like we were repeating ourselves. If this is your new... I'll just trip over my own tongue there. If you're new to the podcast, we renovated this caravan. One of the purposes for it was so it could become our podcasting studio, but it's also a place for guests to stay.
Family and friends to come visit.
We did just have family here.
They did, yeah. We had my sister, brother-in-law and my niece.
Yeah, it was really lovely to see them, show them around and just kind of explore areas we've been to before. With family, it always just feels like a new experience. But before we go any further, first I'd like to say this is the Alternative Living Podcast. Thank you for joining us. I'm B.
I'm Thea.
And together we are the Indie Projects.
And we always leave Gingy Bear. Gingy Bear is our cat. And she travels everywhere with us. So when we're living on the land, she's living on the land, roaming, hunting, doing what she does best. And when we're travelling in our van, she comes along with us as well.
Yep.
So proper adventure cat. We have videos all about our cat and how we travel.
If you're curious about van life with the cat, we do have a video about that as well. Actually, do comment wherever you see this if you want to know more about, maybe if we could do a podcast about cat life. I don't know. Would you want to see that? Listen to that?
There's a new hashtag for you, cat life.
Cat life. I mean, they just have the most amazing lives. Do you not think?
They do. Pretty much wake up, go roaming, do what they want. I forgot what they even do because they don't even do much.
They eat, they sleep, they kill.
Yeah.
They have the best life for a cat. I mean, I wouldn't want to kill, but that went dark really fast. But before we go any further, I would like to say a big thank you to all of our patrons who are our sponsors for the Alternative Living Podcast. They make it possible.
Big up our patrons every day. Like, amazing people here, always here to support us.
Yes.
And we have so much good conversation on there. We post early videos on there, and there's loads of other benefits as well. So if you are interested in supporting us and keeping us on the road and traveling, then please go across to our Patreon and check it out. It starts at just $1.
Yeah, check it out. I mean, we'll never stop doing videos. We want to do them for as long as we can, but basically if you're a patron, you just get access to even more. So it's totally up to you, and we do have a really good community over on there. Now then, today's topic, I'm really into this, and I don't know whether that's because I'm a woman. I feel like I get a lot of women asking me this question. On my personal Instagram, I get people asking me questions about this as well. So I thought it would be a really good idea to do a dedicated podcast all about, well, I was going to call it being a couple in a van, but actually it applies to being a couple in a small space.
You are right, though. I've never had a male contact me and be like, oh, how'd you get on with B? Like, it's not something that I've ever been asked, but you, on the other hand, you've been asked, you know, how do you cope? How do you deal with it? And I don't know if that's because the male partner is usually harder to live with. So the males aren't really reaching out and asking, how can I deal with my wife?
I personally think that it's actually women are a lot more open about emotions and relationships than men are. But that's not to say that men don't have the same feelings as women do in terms of relationships. So I'm curious how today's discussion's gonna go. So just to give you a little bit of background, we've been together since we were 16 years old. We met in 2005 and we've basically been inseparable ever since. It's kind of crazy, but the first 4 years of our relationship, we never had a night apart. We shared a single bed. That was tough.
A lot of people can't get their heads around that. You shared a single bed, like, where did you sleep? And yeah, it was tight.
Spooning is the only way to survive in a single bed.
There wasn't room for a double bed at the time in the house that we were living in. It was just a single room with a single bed. We made it work.
But anyway, so we know each other very well, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to get on well in a small space or being with each other all the time. So when we first actually went into being together 24/7, like literally 24/7, that was 2014 in the T4.
Because originally, even though we were inseparable and we'd spend a lot of time together, we still had our jobs and we'd go off and we wouldn't spend all day every day together, but we would spend every night together.
Exactly.
So now it's changed a lot because obviously our life is our job and our job is our life, and everything just crosses over. And obviously we're, I guess, business partners, and you know, we run this together, and sometimes it can be tricky when you're living and working and there's no separation from work and play.
Yeah, exactly. But I think it's really interesting because we went into being together 24/7 in a really small space, a VWT4. Just to give you some background information on it, we couldn't stand up in ours. We had a bed that turned into a sofa during the day. And we had the swivel seats at the front. Well, one swivel seat. So it was a very compact space. But to be fair, I don't feel like we ever really consciously thought about how we would deal with being in a small space. I think we kind of naturally created these little boundaries, spaces, hobbies to allow us to have space away from each other,
I think
but not upset each other.
When we first started on our adventures in the T4, we didn't have all of this information that you have now, so we wasn't really searching YouTube and trying to figure out questions that we had. We just kind of were so excited to get on the road and to travel that we didn't think like, oh, it is a small space and how will we cope together? We just went and did it, and it worked out.
It did work out. So I thought I'd talk about some of the things that we subconsciously found ourselves doing that actually did allow us to have our own space and time away from each other, even when we were actually still in the same space, as crazy as that sounds. So Theo, what did you do?
So I really got into my photography. I was already into photography, obviously. My job was a filmmaker, so they kind of cross over a lot, as I've mentioned in previous videos. But when you're in beautiful places, I've really got into landscape photography, especially when we were in Scandinavia. So I'd be getting up for sunrise and going out photographing and spend a few hours away from the van. And that kind of gave you time to yourself. And also, I'd photograph sunset, sunrise. So
I was in bed.
So I guess you'd get a lion and to yourself, and on the evenings I'd be off as well photographing, so you'd have another couple of hours to read a book or do whatever you like.
Exactly. And for me, it's not a hobby. I don't know if it's a hobby, but I read an awful lot and I still do. Like reading.
Definitely a hobby.
Is it a hobby?
Yeah.
It's my favourite hobby. I absolutely love reading. And before we went into the van, I just did not have time to read. I couldn't find the time to read. So when we went in the van, I had my Kindle and just downloaded loads of free books. I remember I also downloaded the entire collection of Game of Thrones. So I had loads of books to read.
Can you imagine people in the 80s, before the Kindle was a thing, how many books they must travel with?
Well, I think
That's probably why they all drove like 7.5-ton vehicles, just so they could lug their books around.
I think I had about 5 physical books with me, and I did pick up books along the way as well, so they would take up space, but also I had to be really conscious of the fact that we didn't have a lot of space. So that's why I tried to heavily use my Kindle, because it was tiny. It's like the size of a notebook. It would fit in my bag, and reading is a really great way to kind of immerse yourself in another world and detach yourself from wherever you are. So for me, even though if we were in the exact same space, I was off in my own world, and I didn't personally read to get away from Theo. I just read because I like reading.
Yeah, we're very different when it comes to that. I've never actually read a book. I find it really difficult to read. I can read to a good standard, but I'm really dyslexic, so reading books is not really my thing. I'm much more of like a visual person, whereas you are a visual person, but also books are everything to you.
They are. I absolutely
love
reading.
to just get lost in a world of a book.
I do. So those are our things that we'd do separately mainly. We didn't really have areas of the van because it was so small where we would just separate ourselves. But that actually is interesting to talk about, because in our bigger van, we've kind of naturally gravitated to having our own spaces in our bigger van. Even though it's not that much bigger, it has allowed us to kind of have our own rooms.
And it's interesting as well, like we didn't have a discussion about whose would be what area. We just lived in the van, and over time you just find your space. It's exactly the same on the land. You find the areas that you gravitate to more, and I might like one area and B might like another area, or we might like the same area. It's just naturally a thing. It will just happen. I think if you put too much into it and too much thought into it and say, okay, the bed is your area and the sofa is my area, well, that just happened for us.
Yeah.
And the bed is kind of like the area where I hang out and do all the editing and stuff like that, and you're more happy sitting on the sofa and using that. And obviously there's times where we both sit on the sofa and stuff like that.
We both sit on the bed. That's
Exactly.
where we'll sit to watch Netflix documentaries.
Exactly. So I think you can't overthink these things, because it could really create a weird barrier. We actually know a couple, don't we, who they're actually on YouTube, and when we met up with them, they really had a physical barrier. So she would go to like the front of the van and put something like a screen across, and I don't really think personally I'm into that. Like, I think as soon as you start screening off such a small area, then it becomes even more small. And I think luckily we get on with each other well enough that we're happy to look at each other still.
I suppose,
but it's each to their own.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
Whatever works for you, then go for it. If screening off the front of the van works for you, and that helps you get through and makes you have your space, then by all means do it.
Exactly. Those are the things that work for you. So that's what's important. And then also, it's not just about being alone. Activities together can really change things as well. Me and Theo weren't really avid hikers before we moved into a van 5 years ago.
We did the odd walk, but not like actual hiking. And again, Scandinavia opened up so many opportunities for us. It did.
I think
That's why I'm so excited to go back this summer, because I think that's, to me, Scandinavia is where it all become like, it was amazing. It opened our eyes to beautiful scenery. We'd seen a lot of the world. Well, we'd still seen a lot of the world already.
I didn't realise Europe had such majestic scenery, as naive and stupid as that sounds.
But I think travelling in a van opens your mind a lot more. And for me, it's where the indie projects was born. I think that's where it did become.
We came to a lot of realizations there. Hiking did become a big passion of ours, and that brought us together in the outdoors, but also allowed us to have our own space whilst we were still together. So Theo would still be doing photography. I'd be just like looking at nature, because I absolutely love nature.
Back in the day when I was younger, I had friends who would go off walking in the hills on the weekends, and I'd be like, what are they doing? Like, that's so weird. Like, imagine walking and you're going to get like blisters and it's going to hurt your feet and stuff. But I have actually always loved the outdoors, but the walking side of it for me just never really appealed at all. And then we did the Kungsleden, or we did the hikes in Norway, and that kind of opened our minds again to actually, I can see why they do this.
Yeah.
And then we were like, right, we're going to go all the way and do a massive 440 kilometre hike through Arctic Sweden and just get stuck in.
Actually, that was that one, I'll just quickly dip into that as well. Like, being in a couple in that situation there was some really hard times. Like, Theo had an ear infection. I had my hip tendonitis flare up incredibly bad. You had blisters. There was pain. There was having to stop and film. It's really windy and rainy, and you're just like, oh my gosh, walk faster.
Insert a photo of my feet right now? So
okay, just a bit of a warning for you before it comes up.
If you're squeamish, look away. But yeah, my feet were in a fairly bad state. I went through a huge amount of blister plasters.
Yes, you did. I think we spent about £30 on blister plasters. But yeah, that's because nothing's cheap in Sweden. And when you're buying blister plasters in a remote shop in the middle of nowhere, it's going to cost even more. But they were worth it because they did actually really help.
I think the amount I spent on blister plasters, I probably could have afforded a small cabin in the north somewhere in Sweden.
But you might be listening to this podcast and being like, okay, that's great. You've discussed how you cope together, but you sound far too perfect. Do you not argue? We definitely do argue.
Of course,
think everybody has arguments. If you're in a relationship and you don't argue, that's some kind of craziness, I personally think, because
Witchcraft.
No two people can constantly agree on the same things. You are going to get irritated by them. And also, as a woman, there's different times of the month. Sometimes the PMS just gets so much and it's like, can you stop pressing the keys on your keyboard like that? But I think the best thing to do when you're having an argument or when one of you is just completely losing the plot, the other one's got to stay cool-headed. That's what we've always said. If one of us is going for it, the other one's just not got to rise to the bait. And then when you both do, you're screwed.
And we've not always been like that when we've had arguments in the past. But I think that's something we learn to deal with in the van, is if someone's having a meltdown or someone's having a big, like if we're having an argument, then one of you just has to kind of see reason and kind of sort it out as quickly as possible, because you don't want to be living in a space with someone who you're arguing with, and you don't want that to last.
No.
I guess in a house you can go slam the door and go into another room and, not see each other for a day. Whereas in a van, unless you're like that VANLIFE person where you can put your screen across, you have to live with each other, and it's better just to sort out the problems as soon as they arise and not let them linger and just talk about them. Yeah,
you've got to communicate. Communication is key wherever you are, whether you're living in a house or a small space. You've got to communicate with each other, because some people are just really bad at expressing how they feel, or they haven't even realised that actually it's that's really irritating me, or just whatever. You've just got to communicate, especially when you're in a small space, and you've got to remember to respect each other as well, because everybody's different and everybody reacts differently to the same situation.
Yeah.
And we definitely do certain things. Like, I will get really worked up about something. Like, sometimes if we're going to a wild camping spot, you'll think it's totally fine, and I'll just be like, I just don't have a good feeling about this. And if it's one of those times where it's getting quite late in the day and you're like, I need to stop.
Yeah.
I just want to stop here.
The wild camping thing, we kind of say if one of us isn't feeling it, or you have a funny gut feeling that it's not right, then it's not worth it. Just move on, because you won't be comfortable. But you are amazing at adapting to wild camping spots, and we pretty much stay anywhere.
We've stayed pretty much anywhere.
I just pushed the boundaries a little bit, where I'd probably stay on a police forecourt or something like that. I'm not bothered at all. But
Theo's very, very good at just being like, you know what, whatever. Whereas for me, that was one of the main reasons why initially, all those years ago, when you wanted to move into a van and go travelling, I was just like, no way. Like, the stress of having to stay places where is it illegal to stay here? I don't want to stay there. That's going to make me feel really stressed out. But it's actually like, you know what? You've just got to do things in life that make you uncomfortable.
And now you're so laid back.
And then you will know whether you actually like it or not.
Yeah.
It's so true. If you don't push yourself past your comfort zone in certain things, you will never know what you're actually capable of.
And like, in terms of like wild camping and campsites and stuff like that, I think the first year of travel we stayed in like five campsites the whole time, because we had a flat battery or we couldn't find water anywhere. It was never because we were scared to wild camp. Wild camping is incredibly easy. It's all in your mind, where you think that maybe it's not, it's not acceptable, or someone might knock on the door or something.
You're in a vehicle. Vehicles can park pretty much anywhere. So.
And I just think
it's only one night.
As human beings, like, would you go and knock on someone's door and ask them to move on? Probably not. Maybe you're a ballsy person who's willing to do that, but I think 95% of people won't go and just knock on a random van and start an argument. So we have never had anyone, not one person, knock on the door and move us on, apart from the police.
We've had people knock on the door for a chat.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
never to
yeah.
move us on. So that's been nice. I've just realised we went on a massive tangent there. What the hell has that got to do with being a couple in a van?
Well, it's all to do with that gut feeling, and
Yeah, I
if someone's
suppose.
comfortable, if someone's
Yeah.
not comfortable, then move on. It's not worth it. It's not worth your relationship.
Oh, also, that's another thing to talk about. Being a couple in a van or a small space, roles really play a part. We subconsciously, is that the word, fell into roles in the van. Theo does most of the driving, filling up on fuel, mechanical stuff, all that boring stuff that I just literally don't care about. Whereas I do most of the cooking because I enjoy cooking, and Theo's a terrible cook. And I will do the tidying because he doesn't tidy to my standard.
See,
No matter how much I tell him, he will never tidy to my
I'm
standard.
only a terrible cook because I don't want to cook.
Well, the truth's out now, so let's give you some cooking lessons.
I think I'd be a good cook.
You can make a good fried egg.
It's just, when there's something where you purely do not enjoy it, and it's like, is it worth going through stressing yourself out cooking when you actually hate it? When B's an amazing cook, like literally
I
some
wouldn't
of the
go that
meals.
far.
No, you are. Some of the meals you make are incredible, and yeah, it's like, I think it's like with anything. Like if you run a business and you have staff, then you play on their strengths. You don't go,
You're calling me staff.
no, but like we're business partners.
I know.
So essentially you play on each other's strengths. So it's very similar like with running a business. Like you don't go, oh, Jimmy's amazing at I don't know, like stats and maths and stuff like that. You don't go, okay, we're going to make him clean the office. It's you use people's strengths to your advantage to make your life easier. So that's exactly what we do.
Actually, yeah, that's interesting because that also does flow onto our business working relationship as well. So as Theo mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, we are the indie projects together, which over the years has morphed into our way of making an income. This is what we do full time. It's absolutely amazing. And we naturally fell into these roles together, working together.
Yeah, and I think it's definitely harder for you because I don't really have any boundaries in terms of work, so I just work.
Theo
And like
would work 24/7 if he could.
So
Look, when he's ill, I'm like, you need a day's rest. No, there's stuff I could be doing. Just calm down. You're going to make yourself even worse, and then you're going to be off even longer.
Yeah, so rest and time off is important, and that's something where we're still not perfect at it, but we are working through them problems, and maybe it's not good for me to say we need to be working 7 days a week, 12 hours a day. That's not good. That's not healthy. So right now we're trying to schedule time into the week where we feel comfortable that we've got time off and we don't feel guilty about it.
I will never feel guilty. No, that's a lie, actually. No, I will. Because at the end of the day, when it comes to working for yourself, if you don't do it, it's not going to get done.
Yeah, no
and
one
then
else
it's just
is gonna
going to
do it.
build up, and then you're going to get stressed. And you will feel guilty because you just made your own life harder
Yeah.
for being lazy.
So I think, days off is important, especially for the relationship, so you don't tire yourself out, get run down. That's exactly why we went down to one video a week while we were on the land, because, well, we did do the daily vlog for a month.
Coming up to Christmas. But before
that was good fun.
we've been doing 2 videos a week for years.
Yeah, and it's a long time. It's a lot of work, and one video a week is still a lot of work when you're trying to build a whole environment on our land in Portugal. We've got so many jobs that we need to do every day outside of YouTube and outside of, speaking to companies, organizing brand deals, replying to emails from you guys. Like, there's always stuff to be done. But when you're trying to physically build things, that takes away from your time that you can be putting into the YouTube channel and stuff like that. So I think one video a week was important for us to have that little bit of extra time. It wasn't time off. It was just time to do other things. So, to build our toilet, whatever you want to call it. We're building a caravan shelter right now.
Mm-hmm.
There's all these different things of the infrastructure of the land.
And then also we've got to work around the weather because Portugal's rainy season's come really late this year. We were anticipating it to be in February. It's only kind of just come in April.
Literally, we had no rain for the whole of the winter, and now we're outside building stuff and we need to leave the land. The rain has come.
Oh, that's actually probably a good thing to talk about.
But the rain's important.
Theo accidentally, well, it wasn't accidentally. He kind of mentioned yesterday in an Instagram live that we were doing that we are actually heading back to the UK. And I don't know when this podcast is coming out, but it'll probably come out when we're in the UK.
Yeah, so that really wasn't the plan. It was not the plan at all to head back to the UK. We were going from our land and we were going to head straight to the north, basically, to Scandinavia, and things have changed. A big project's come in and we're really excited to, do this big project, and we can't say anything about this big project. So it's kind of like, should we have even said anything? But I
people
slipped.
Will see as
people
well
were
anyway.
asking, but we're coming back to the UK and we're going to get some bits and pieces finished on the van, and then we're going to film a van tour, and then basically
finally
we will be heading to Scandinavia. But we're just I think we're going to be about a month behind on going to
probably
Scandinavia because of said project. So stay tuned. It's going to be amazing.
It is really exciting, and I can't wait to share it with you all.
So
it's going to be brilliant. But it does mean that our plans have slightly changed. So we're trying to work on that as well.
But we're still going to, it's only, I don't know how long it's going to be, but let's say a month. That means that for you guys, nothing's really going to change because the videos that we filmed on the land and stuff like that are going to be coming out in that time. And then we'll be heading to Scandinavia and nothing will really change for you guys. So in terms of the filming of the videos, they might come out a few weeks later, but it's going to happen. And the Scandinavian project that we're doing is going to be so good. I'm so excited to go back to where it all started and just explore, go hiking, take Gingy Bear with us. She's going to see some mad, exciting sights.
It's going to be amazing to have Gingy Bear with us in Scandinavia. I can't wait to show her the real mountains.
So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this podcast, all about, couples and how we get on and living on the land, living in a van, living in a small space, because it is important. It's a really important topic, and it's one that you get a lot of questions about and I don't. And that I find that really interesting.
Yeah, that is definitely very interesting. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed today's podcast, and the next one, who knows what the next topic's going to be, but it'll be something that you guys have requested. So
people keep sending us ideas, which is really good. If you've got any ideas for topics, leave them in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe if you're not already.
Yeah, so when we say subscribe, it depends where you're listening to. If you're on iTunes, subscribe on there. Spotify, subscribe on there. Or YouTube, subscribe on there. And hit that notification button as well, because people have been saying that notifications have changed for them and they're not getting notified about our videos. So do make sure that it's on. That bell is tapped.
Click the bell. Anyway, take it easy, guys, and we'll see you on the next video.